No matter whom you love or how you speak, or whatever your abilities, you are welcome here. Whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears in your eyes, you are welcome here. If you come with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands, then you are indeed welcome here. Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of New Orleans, one of 3 congregations in the greater New Orleans area. The other 2 are Community Church UU in Lakeview and North Shore UU in Lacombe. Together, we are the Greater New Orleans Unitarian Universalists, or GNU. This congregation has gathered in love since 1833 to seek wholeness and work for justice in the world. I am Margot Anderson, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And if you are a visitor, we invite you to raise your hand so that we can greet you. And if you're watching via live stream, please wave or say hello in the comments. If you would like to know more about our programming for children and families, Katie Gelfand, our Director of Religious Exploration, is the person to ask. After the time for all ages, children and youth are welcome to spend the service in the nursery or here at the all ages table, activity table in the back of the sanctuary. We are a lay-led church, and on Sunday mornings we invite UUA ministers, leaders from community organizations working for social justice, and other voices of hope, courage, and spiritual or intellectual transformation to visit our pulpit. Today we are delighted to welcome historian, author, and journalist, Robert Fieseler. I'll remind you that all the words and lyrics for the Chalice Lighting readings and hymns are available by aiming your smartphone camera at the QR code, which are in the back of your chairs. The second QR code enables you to see announcements in this week's digest. A few highlights Our own Casey Groves, local author and actor, will be hosting a meditation and movement course entitled Building a Mystery School, Going Indigenous with the Ancient Greeks. It starts Wednesday, September 20th, and a part of the course fee will be donated back to the church, so please see Casey when he's recovered from COVID for more information about joining this class. Jolanda Walters will be hosting a drum community dinner. Drum stands for Diverse, Revolutionary, UU, Multicultural, for all interested Black and Indigenous people of color, Unitarian Universalists, and friends in her home, Friday, September 22nd. Please see the announcement in your bulletin for more information. I will also call your attention to a jazzy afternoon, a fundraiser on the North Shore for our sister church in Lacombe, Sunday, September 17th. If anybody has not yet signed up for a congregational house meeting, which are really fun, informal get-togethers hosted by the Caring Circle and the membership team, you can do so after the service. Christiane in the back will have a sign-up sheet for you. And now I'd like to ask Katie Gelfand to come up and give us a spotlight announcement.
Good morning, everyone. I have a clipboard that means I'm important. So I just wanted to remind everyone that In Gathering begins next week on Thursday, and I hope everyone will be able to come to as many events as possible. Thursday night, we have a sing-along with Zach and Jane here in the sanctuary, and if you have any song requests, please email them to Zach as soon as possible. On Friday night, we are having a trivia and talent show here in the sanctuary. It's going to be very, very fun. There will be snacks and drinks provided, and I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a wonderful, beautiful, colorful, bright evening. And then on Saturday afternoon from 4 to 6, I will be offering community ear acupuncture here in the sanctuary. Please enter in silence. You can come anytime between whatever the times I wrote. I think it's 4 and 6. And then on Sunday, we have our water communion, followed by a potluck hosted or organized by the Caring Circle. So if you can, please sign up in the back of the sanctuary after with Christiane and let her know what food you can bring. You can also sign up through the link in the digest. And I still need a few helpers to help with the talent or with the event on Friday. So I need someone to help me with decorations. I already picked them out. You just have to help me set them up. Someone else to just help with setup on Friday, Friday before the party, and then a couple more people for cleanup, and then someone maybe to help me on Saturday with the setup for Sunday morning. So please come and find me with the clipboard. Very easy, nice things, great way to be in community with each other as we co-create this wonderful in-gathering time together. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. And now, if everyone will please rise in body or spirit and join me as we read our call to awareness and amends, and then our chalice lighting. You'll find the call to awareness and amends at the QR code or at the back of your gray hymnal, the back inside cover. I'll read the regular text if you'll respond with the italicized text. We gather today at a crossroads on land the Choctaw, the place of many tongues.
A place we call home.
But we are newcomers to this land.
While native peoples are of this land. Caddo, Natchez, Choctaw, Chitimacha, and Homa, Tunica, Biloxi, Atakapaishak, and more.
Know that we gather
on land that was stolen.
The spoils of colonialism and broken treaties.
Of forced removal and genocide.
Acknowledging this history is just the first step.
We must set ourselves to the task of repair.
Where we have harmed,
we seek to heal.
Where we have taken,
we seek to give.
Where we have disparaged,
we seek to honor.
Just as the flame of our chalice
lights our way to beloved community,
we add life-giving water to earth.
To recall the land's native roots and to nurture solidarity.
Only when we strive to make amends
do we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of each person.
And please remain as you are as we light the chalice of our heritage. And join me in reading the words you will find in your order of worship. We light this chalice to celebrate the inherent worth and dignity of every person, to reaffirm the historic pledge of liberal religion, to seek that justice which transcends mere legality and moves toward the resolution of true equality, and to share the love which is ultimately beyond even our cherished reason, that love which unites us.
Please remain risen and join in singing our opening hymn, number 1028, The Fire of Commitment, in your teal hymnal. From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when we hunger and our passion meet to show us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living brings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise and fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion mean to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. Please be seated.
Good morning. Has the traveling chalice returned? Okay, great. It's still enjoying its visit. Wonderful. So I'd like to invite the young ones who are in our hearts and not presently with us, but also those that are young at heart and able-bodied enough to come and join me on the carpet circles. Is one. He's just hiding. That's okay. I see you, Reed. It's okay. You have fun. So today I'm going to share a book that I love so much. called Julian the Mermaid. I think you've heard it before. And I'm going to try to leave it out because if you are not able to see the pictures in it, the illustrations are just so beautiful. And I have two reasons for loving this book. One, I am also a mermaid. I don't know if I've come out to the congregation as being a mermaid, but I am a mermaid. And also, it's just such a wonderful book about the importance of self-expression and how much it means when the people that love us see us for who we truly are and celebrate that. So, Julian the Mermaid. On Saturdays, Julian and his abuela always go swimming. This is a boy named Julian, and this is his abuela, and these are some mermaids. They're riding on the subway home back from the pool. And while Julian is sitting on the subway, he's imagining going into the water and taking off his clothes and swimming and swimming. And then all these fish and jellyfish and stingrays and eels all surround him while he's swimming in the water. And then he imagines he has a mermaid tail. He's swimming around in the water and he comes upon this big blue fish with beautiful white decorations holding a necklace in its mouth. "Vámonos, mi hijo," says his abuela. It's time to get off the subway. They wave goodbye to the mermaids. "Abuela, did you see the mermaids?" "I saw them, mi hijo." "Abuela, I am also a mermaid." They go inside. She says, "I'm going to go take a bath." Julian has a good idea. Takes off his shoes and his shirt and his shorts, and then he finds beautiful plants to decorate his hair with, and maybe a little lipstick. And he sees this beautiful billowing curtain, and he gets an idea. That would make a great mermaid tail. He's parading around, dancing, being a mermaid, and then his abuela comes out of the bath and looks at him funny. Uh-oh. She walks away, and he seems sad, maybe a little embarrassed. She comes back up. "Come here, mi hijo." Wearing her beautiful blue dress with white decorations, she hands him a necklace. "For me, abuela?" "For you, Julian." They hold hands and walk out the door. "Where are we going?" "You'll see, mi hijo." They walk up on a bunch of beautifully dressed sea creatures. There's a jellyfish and mermaids and an octopus. "Mermaids," whispers Julian. "Like you, mi hijo. Let's join them." And they do. And they do a parade down the beach with all the magical sea creatures. So I hope this book will remind everyone not only how important it is to be you, but how important it is that we celebrate and support others in being who they are.
And now, because it is the first Sunday of the month, we're going to have a time set aside for the sharing of joys and sorrows. So I'll invite anybody who would like to come up to just come and make a little line right there. Ours is a welcoming community where we find connection, a spiritual community where we find meaning, Ours is a sharing community where our joys are amplified, a caring community where our sorrows are lessened. We take this moment to reflect on our joys and sorrows and acknowledge the mutual support of our community. Anyone who would like may come forward and release a stone in the water, either in silence or with a brief verbal expression of a joy or sorrow, like this.
Good morning. I just got back from a wonderful trip to the Northeast out of the heat and spent time with lovely people, went to a WNBA game and a Broadway show and Central Park, and it was all really good. And so then I came home and had COVID, and and now I'm feeling much better, so it was a lot of joy.
Good morning. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Laura Miller, and I've been a member of this church for a long time. I started attending in 2003 and then joined right after Katrina. I've been gone for the past year. Duty called me elsewhere. But my great joy is to be back here this morning, and thanks to all of you who have given me a warm welcome. And I'll see you all again next Sunday. I'm in town briefly, but it's so great to be here.
It's wonderful to have you back, Laura.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Jane, the piano player, and I have a sorrow. My husband and I have a getaway place. Can you hear me? Yeah, in Tarpon Springs, Florida. And we just barely missed being in the hurricane. We were in the cone for a while, but then it went further north. And I would just ask that all of you, we know what it's like to be through a hurricane, and please all be thinking of the people, particularly in the towns of Cedar Key, Crystal River, Steinhatchee, and Horseshoe Beach. They all really got whomped, and we need to send all of our positive vibes to them.
So I'm Fia, and as always, I am, well, as the last 7.5 months, I am Grandma Fia, and I just wanted to let everybody know that Zaid, my grandson, is in DC this week, so I'm a little lonely. But we talked to him yesterday, and he is visiting with his Nana, the other grandma, and they are having a wonderful time. And he is, some of you may remember that he was born at 6 pounds in 7.5 months ago. He's now 22.5 pounds, 7.5 months later, so we're like, and he's doing wonderful.
Sounds like a real overachiever, Fia. It's wonderful. Following the prayer, we'll have a brief time of silence and then sing our meditation hymn, Voice Still and Small. May we join now together in remembering those who have spoken, those they have named, and those we hold in our own hearts.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing in dark and rain, sorrow and pain, still you remain, singing, calming my fears, quenching my tears through all the years, singing.
Please join me as we read our responsive reading, Liberation is Costly by Desmond Tutu, found at number 593 of your hymnals or at the QR code. I'll begin, and please respond with the text in italics. Liberation is costly. Even after the Lord had delivered the Israelites from Egypt, they had to travel through the desert.
They had to bear the responsibilities and difficulties of freedom.
There was starvation and thirst, and they kept complaining.
They complained that their diet was monotonous.
Many of them preferred the days of bondage in the flesh pots of Egypt.
We must remember that liberation is costly. It needs unity.
We must hold hands and refuse to be divided. We must be ready.
Some of us will not see the day of our liberation physically.
But those people will have contributed to the struggle.
Let us be united. Let us be filled with hope. Let us be those who respect one another.
morning. My name is Bobby Fieseler, and I'm here today to talk about the upstairs lounge fire. The formal title of the sermon is After the Upstairs Lounge, The Search for Strength. And I chose that title because I think it's really interesting to be giving a talk on the upstairs lounge, like one of the foremost tragedies in queer New Orleans and queer Louisiana history, on the weekend of Southern decadence, which is the opposite pole sort of the sort of queer emotional scale. Decadence is a celebration of queer hedonism, right? The arrival of, depending on your thing, the yoni or the phallus. I mean, in public. I mean, it's like it's sort of like a wild, public, unarrestable expression and celebration from a place of positivity of who we are as queer folk, and also a kind of acceptance and a cheering from the sidelines of that public hedonism on the part of allies and straight folk. So it's really a culmination and a celebration of what I think a lot of what queer New Orleans is about, which is about unbridled acceptance and positivity. And that occurs on this scale and at this point in the timeline as a tradition that sits sort of in this opposite sphere from the heaviness and the reality of the great scope of death and violence that the queer community faced from a prior American Louisiana New Orleans society that tried to push such queer life into the shadows in a state of semi-closetedness, in a state of feigned ignorance, in a state of plausible deniability, in a state of silence and lack of citizenship. And so I think about all these things a lot because I'm a queer NOLA historian and I live side by side them all the time. I wrote the book Tinderbox about the 1973 upstairs lounge fire, which published in 2018. And then since then, I've been constantly, it's been this unending lifetime tour, it seems like, of being a kind of queer public speaker about the upstairs lounge tragedy, and I've given about 200 talks on this, and it's led to me taking on a role I never intended when I wrote a book, which is becoming like a queer public scholar and also a community advocate. So I worked for a 5-year span over the course of giving these 200 talks to all the way up to convincing various groups and power constituencies to sort of bend the knee and acknowledge the upstairs lounge. So in 2019, I convinced the New York Times to publish the first public obituary about an upstairs lounge victim, Reverend Bill Larson, and that was published. In 2022, I worked with the New Orleans City Council for the passage of a resolution recognizing the 1973 upstairs lounge tragedy, apologizing for the historic silence of New Orleans city government, and posthumously honoring and naming the victims in the city council chamber, and that happened. And then this summer was the 50th anniversary of the upstairs lounge tragedy, and I worked with the New Orleans Times-Picayune Advocate, whatever the name of the newspaper is now, towards acknowledging the bias of their historic coverage, which led to them apologizing in an editorial. So it's been a wide journey and a trajectory for me to be involved in this, and I kind of want to just give this talk. I normally script these talks. I normally know exactly what I'm going to say at each kind of moment. But I sort of want to give this one from the heart, and I just want to talk about the arc and the trajectory from invisibility to visibility, and how the upstairs lounge story is part of that, and it's part of a search for strength and greater resilience of the New Orleans queer community, and also because I'm not just in a queer environment here, reflective of allies who participated in that journey too. So, the greatest weapon against despair, I would say, I've learned over the course of all these upstairs lounge talks I've given, is our ability to choose fact over myth. One set of informed evidence capable of rousing belief, hope, action, in this case in favor of queer folk, over another set of less informed evidence capable of plunging one's soul into darkness, the darkest night of loneliness, inaction, devastation, that kind of thing. The task of queer historians and queer public advocates, as I've become like myself, who work to plumb the past, to recover a lost American legacy of non-heterosexual citizenship in life, is the task to deliver to the public what is in reality like a cavalcade of atrocities, violence, impoverishment, imprisonment, death that queer folk faced in the past, but also to present it in a way that doesn't paralyze the audience, doesn't paralyze the viewer or listener, and gives them some room to do something more, to take action in their own lives, to reflect on something in themselves that gives them a little bit of oomph, a little bit of energy forward. So how does one contend with the visceral realities of violence in the past, those terrible facts? From my perspective, how do we place it all in a historical lens? Not within the terror of the immediacy of these events, but within the lens of 10 to 50 years of time, say, which we are, we're right at that marker with the 50th anniversary of the upstairs lounge fire taking place this summer, through which, we can read deeper meaning from the embers of turmoil that dwelled all the way back there. We can see how the processes of change and transformation truly began somewhere, in many cases, somewhere very painful. So many of you have heard of the 1973 Upstairs Lounge tragedy. I'll give an overview for those of you who have not. It was a notoriously unsolved arson fire that took place at a gay bar called the Upstairs Lounge, which was located on the ragtag fringe of the New Orleans French Quarter in 1973, and it claimed 32 lives. It was the deadliest fire on record in New Orleans history, and the worst mass killing of homosexuals in 20th century America. Really, it was a record that stood until the 2016 massacre at Pulse in Orlando. And yet, in its time, despite the scope of this tragedy, the Upstairs Lounge received just a few days of media coverage, very unsympathetic coverage mostly, in its time due to rampant anti-gay bigotry, both in America and in a more complex, nuanced form in New Orleans society. Despite a bounty of evidence pointing towards a chief suspect for this arson, this crime, an internally conflicted, gay-for-pay hustler named Roger Dale Nunez, who was ejected from the Upstairs Lounge minutes before the fire began, violently screaming, "I'm going to burn you all out." I'll repeat what he said. "I'm going to burn you all out." Folks, that's what criminologists call motive. So despite this man being ejected from the bar screaming the word burn, this crime was permitted to become a kind of political inconvenience, a sort of bureaucratic inconvenience and source of embarrassment due to its queer overtones in 1973, and thus permitted to become the historic mystery that it remains today. The Upstairs Lounge is still considered an unsolved crime, a fire that the NOPD still banks on, and I'm working with them trying to get them to resolve this through a supplemental report, but they call it a fire of undetermined origin, even though they found the can of lighter fluid in the front staircase, the entrance to the Upstairs Lounge bar, immediately after the fire. So it's of undetermined origin, but there's a 7.5 ounce bottle of Roncinol lighter fluid right in the place where the fire began, right in front of the gay bar. So it's a source of great frustration and pain. But I'm glad you guys played the song United We Stand, because I want to focus on a little bit about the character of the Upstairs Lounge bar and why it was special. The Upstairs Lounge bar was an egalitarian gay space that was in many ways a forerunner to many modern queer safe havens. It was a unique place even in New Orleans, which had entertained this kind of live and let live atmosphere where there was a kind of plausible deniability, semi-closetedness, where people wider New Orleanians allowed bachelors, spinsters, dandies, longtime companions, any sort of euphemistic term for a queer folk, to exist in their society in so much as they never declared what dirty behavior they did behind closed doors, and in so much they never emerged publicly to politically organize. And so the upstairs, and it was widely, it was separated by the sexes. In the early 1970s, gays and lesbians had not gotten their act together to organize politically. They would try to hold meetings together, and then neither the gay constituency nor the lesbian constituency could agree who was going to talk first. And meetings would just devolve over the fact that no one could agree who wanted to speak. Trans issues were not even on the radar at that point, and because this was in the South, there was racial discrimination widely in the gay and lesbian community. In gay bars on Bourbon Street, if you were black and gay, you could not enter any of the the suit-wearing, finer A-gay, they called them, establishments, such as Cafe Lafitte in Exile. However, the upstairs lounge was a notable exception to everything I've just described. It was an environment where if you were black or white homosexual, you were welcome to come imbibe, to drink and have fun within this sort of atmosphere that reminded me a little bit of like a gay Cheers. You would walk up, it was a second-story bar. I mean, they called it upstairs because literally it was up the stairs. So you would walk up this twisting staircase from Iberville Street, which is this seedy street where there was a lot of different various bars, but the upstairs lounge was the gem on Iberville Street. And if you walked up the 13 wooden stairs, cloaked in cloth in 1973, in this environment of oppression, you have to imagine yourself sort of entering a portal up, heading up and away from the world that oppressed you with all its rules below and into your favorite social club. And you would enter the upstairs lounge door, this front door, into this wide cavernous space that stretched across 3 buildings, and you would immediately see what? A white baby grand piano, and you would see queer folk, guess what? Singing show tunes around it, okay? They'd be having fun. They'd be singing songs like Oklahoma, etc., and they liked to sing the song, as was highlighted here, United We Stand, Amongst Together. And the song United We Stand became a sort of anthem that summed up the ethos of the upstairs lounge space. I'll sing it for you now, briefly. I'm not a professional singer. My mom tells me I can sing, but I feel like every mom tells her son he can sing. So I'm just gonna sing. She told me once that I should audition for American Idol. I was like, this is whatever, Mom. All right, but so the song United We Stand went, me, me, me. United we stand, divided we fall. And if our back should ever be against the wall, we'll be together, together, you and I. So that the upstairs lunch patrons would sing that song together, and then they would toast each other at the culmination of the song, oftentimes singing it drunkenly or in tears, acknowledging and celebrating at that point in their life who they were, in the face of existential, clear and present dangers oftentimes that dwelled with them in the world that oppressed them below from this bar. And if you were a lesbian, you were welcome at the upstairs lounge bar. There was a lesbian bar patron who would become a future bar owner named Charlene Snyder. She opened up the lesbian bar Charlene's. And every time I say the word Charlene in New Orleans, somebody claps. People love Charlene. But so Charlene would drink at the upstairs lounge with her friend Kenneth Harrington, who was a gay businessman in for his 40s who worked for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And anyway, Charlene ended up opening later in life, around 1977, a little bit, the lesbian bar Charlene's, which was located on Elysian Fields in North Rampart. Charlene would drink at the upstairs lounge. If you were experimenting with various kinds of personae and gender, you didn't know that you were trans because the word trans didn't exist. You didn't know about gender dysphoria because the concept of gender dysphoria hadn't traveled down to meet you in the South here. But you were feeling that you weren't just your birth gender. You were welcome to drink at the upstairs lounge. If you were black and gay, you were welcome at the upstairs lounge, not just to drink, but you could date, which was controversial in the early 1970s. It wasn't until the 1980s that New Orleans gay bars and the wider gay community formed BWMT because they found it was so necessary in the 80s, which is called Black and White Men Together, which was a group founded specifically to facilitate the kind of interracial dating that had happened inside the upstairs lounge bar before the upstairs lounge bar was destroyed on the night of June 24th, 1973. So the fire happens at the upstairs lounge. It happens on a very busy night, the night of the beer bust. The beer bust was the busiest night of the week at the upstairs lounge. It was busy for a reason. It was a really good deal, and it was popular with working class gay men who cared about good deals and who were wage earners who needed to save money. The beer bust at the upstairs lounge was a drink special from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. on Sundays that had $1 for 2 hours of unlimited draft beer, right, plus a returnable 50-cent deposit for the pitcher. I mean, this was New Orleans in the 70s, man. So, like, you would have, like, on that Sunday night at the fire, men were drinking and singing around the white baby grand piano, and the piano player would take requests, and it was bustling and enjoyable. And fire out of nowhere strikes this environment. There is the front door, you have to picture the front door to the upstairs lounge onto the staircase opens, and people turned expecting to greet friends. And flames suddenly shoot into the room as if launched from a flamethrower, cleaving 44 feet across the front room in a backdraft that swallows the crowd that were singing at the white baby grand piano and chewing up decorations and wallpaper and carpeting and melting hair and clothes and skin. And quite literally, it was eating away very fast over the course of about 5 minutes, eating away people in front of everyone in this environment. And you have to imagine, it happens so fast. Imagine having 30 seconds to choose which way to run. That's your only choice. As people scream and bodies stampede, and perhaps being separated from a friend or a committed lover in the pandemonium, and emerging somehow outside from the upstairs lounge bar through that madness, and then looking up, and noticing that committed partner, that friend, that lover is not standing beside you. That was the chaos of the upstairs lounge. It was a cataclysmic event that literally was explosive. Flames burst through this secretive second-story gay bar on the fringe of the French Quarter, and then onlookers, spectators came by the hundreds to sort of watch what was happening as firefighters, most all of the city's emergency workers struggled to put out this blaze. And in the end, 29 were dead and 3 more were dying at Charity Hospital Parish doomed to gruesome deaths, and it led to ultimately a fatality number of 32. And in response to it, much of the city of New Orleans, it's well known if you've read anything about the upstairs lounge, turned its back on the victims and survivors. So city officials did not issue public apologies or make statements of sympathy for the upstairs lounge dead. The NOPD made homophobic statements on the street about the character of the individuals who died within the upstairs lounge. And religious institutions, it's said, uniformly turned their backs on the upstairs lounge victims. But I want to highlight a little bit about the individuals who fought back and the individuals who who really fought to get the word out about the upstairs lounge bar in the wake of the tragedy, and the institutions that supported the queer community in the crisis. And it wasn't just institutions. Much is known about. I'll take you back a little bit. So there was a church in New Orleans called the Metropolitan Community Church, and that church had been housed for a certain span of time inside the upstairs lounge bar. And the Metropolitan Community Church had a pastor named Reverend Bill Larson who perished gruesomely in the upstairs lounge tragedy. If you Google the fire, the image of the pastor in the window, the image of the individual who perished and was left in the windowsill was the pastor, Reverend Bill Larson, who would have been the leader to lead the queer New Orleans community in the wake of this terrible, devastating event. But he died. And so there were National Gay Liberation was alerted to the tragedy happening in New Orleans, and for the first time in gay liberation history, leaders from both coasts flew to and descended upon New Orleans to try to manage the tragedy. One of the individuals who came was the founding pastor of the Metropolitan Community Church, Troy Perry of the Metropolitan Community Church, net-wide, the denomination. And when Troy Perry arrived, he found most of the city had turned its back, but he found some organizations willing to step up and help. And one of the organizations that willing to step up and help was the First Unitarian Church. It's not well known. So the First Unitarian Church in 1971 was the mother church, the sort of place, the environment that allowed the MCC of New Orleans to meet for the first time as a gay-affirming Christian congregation. And I have the announcement, and this was at a time when it would have been considered incredibly controversial for gay Christians to meet in any kind of church environment. But so the organizational new congregation will be organized. The meeting will be held Sunday at 2 p.m. in the auditorium. So it's not even in a side chapel; it's in a made space of the First Unitarian Church. So you have gay Christians organizing first here at the Unitarian Church, and then after they started here, they got going. Eventually were meeting at the upstairs lounge, and then eventually they found that they had their own little worship space on Magazine Street around the time of the fire. So there was an MCC sort of network, foundation, establishment here that Troy Perry met with, right, when he arrived, and he was able to utilize that as a sort of seed to start getting the word out and start ministering to the community and start making sure that the people who died in the fire received proper burials, received public funerals, and he took steps, and he wanted to take steps to make sure that there was a large public memorial for the upstairs lounge victims that would happen soon. And Troy Perry had to fight. He had to fight to try to get a French Quarter church to agree to hold a memorial for 32 queer dead in New Orleans. And he eventually succeeded in finding a place, a well-known civil rights church on Rampart Street called St. Mark's, right? That was important in the civil rights era, important in the AIDS rights era, and also answered the call for the upstairs lounge victims. That service was so important because pretty much everyone who attended that service became politically activated by Troy Perry. An incident occurred where Troy Perry had promised all of the gay mourners at St. Mark's when they met in the afternoon of July 1st, 1973, that they were going to be protected in their closetedness, and that they would not be photographed going to a gay funeral, because their jobs would be at risk, their lives would be at stake, their ability to have homes, their ability to rent homes would be at stake in an environment of criminalization. So Troy Perry gives a sermon at St. Mark's, and then he leaves, and he rushes back and he informs the crowd, "I'm so sorry, I told all of you that your closetedness would be protected, but cameras have set up outside the church, and you're all going to be photographed on the way out." And then pandemonium ensues inside St. Mark's. Nobody knows what to do until eventually a woman who's only identified as a butch lesbian stands up and says, "I came in through the front door and I'm damn well going out that way." And people cheer this woman on, and then everyone else rises with her, and they all march out the front doors of St. Mark's onto Rampart Street, ready to face the cameras, ready to out themselves to the world. And each individual who decided to out themselves in that way on July 1st, 1973 at St. Mark's, went on, interestingly enough, many of them went on to become very important gay and lesbian and queer rights activists in New Orleans. And one of them was Charlene Snyder, who walked out the front door of St. Mark's with Troy Perry, who later opened the bar Charlene's and who was important in the 1980s, 1990s search for queer rights. Another person who went out was the upstairs lounge survivor, Stuart Butler, who was important also in the foundation of gay political organizations together. And another person was Bill Rushton, the famous journalist for the Vieux-Carré Courier. There were more and more people. What's not known about that scene in St. Mark's is that there had been another church that stepped forward, that had made an offer for that important funeral to take place. And that church is the First Unitarian Church. People don't even know this, had stepped forward. So I want to read this because this is a note that Troy Perry wrote. "It should be noted that Ms. Evelyn Barrett of the First Unitarian Church on Jefferson Street in New Orleans offered without contact the usage of her church. The offer was deeply appreciated. The intent of the committee was to hold the service as close to the place of the fire as possible. Ms. Barrett was properly thanked and advised of the appreciation of the committee." And then members of the Unitarian congregation were at St. Mark's at that important seminal moment for gay rights. Another thing I want to talk about is everyone talks about the cynicism, right, and the unsympathetic coverage that followed the upstairs lounge tragedy. There was an artist and a playwright who had been at the upstairs lounge with some of her gay friends, who decided to step forward and say that what happened at the upstairs lounge wasn't right and that these people were my friends. And it was a person named Suzanne J. Fosberg. I don't know if you are aware or not, who wrote a piece in the Vieux-Carré Courier where she says, quote, 29 friends of mine died in the fire. I don't know which ones they were. My friend Adam Fontenot is dead, and so are 28 other people. All my friends, whether I know their names or not. Ms. Fosberg then, and many people reference the story she wrote in the upstairs lounge, in the Vieux-Carré Courier, where she talked about her friends perishing in the upstairs lounge. This was a straight Allied woman who eventually, went on to live a very interesting life. And when she perished, it was interestingly enough, I brought this up, this is her obituary. Her memorial service was held at the First Unitarian Church. She was tied in and had an association with this congregation specifically. And so I find it really interesting that I think that a lot is spoken about the way that the queer community, sort of mustard seeds were planted by Troy Perry in the form of Charlene Snyder, other individuals that eventually led to organization and the percolation of a political consciousness. But not enough is talked about, I think, about the allies who helped and the allies who were necessary on that journey for the upstairs lounge to be known and for queer rights to manifest and solidify in New Orleans. And I think a huge part of that story has to do with the First Unitarian Church deciding that they're going to support the creation of the Metropolitan Community of Church in New Orleans in 1971, and then remembering those ties in 1973 by offering that church again to hold the public memorial if necessary for Troy Perry and the others when they wanted it. And then Ms. Fosberg continues on that lineage. But this is significant because a lot of queer activism then solidifies in 1977 when an anti-homosexual spokesperson comes to New Orleans to perform at the Summer Pops. I don't know if you've heard of this person or not. An individual named Anita Bryant comes, the former second runner-up of the Miss America contest and the spokesperson for Florida Orange Juice, comes to perform at the Summer Pops, and the local queer community and queer allies unite for the first time in a political act of resistance, saying, no, she cannot come here, and with city dollars coming, and we will not, and we will resist this large concert that people want to put on for her. And the organization was called Human Equal Rights for Everyone, or HERE. It was formed provisionally. And Charlene Snyder, Stuart Butler, a lot of the individuals who'd walked out of the St. Mark's Church in honor of the upstairs lounge victims went there. And the HERE meetings were held, oftentimes, and especially prayer meetings were held at the First Unitarian Church. People don't even know this. So there was, in June 1977, HERE organizes a massive gay rights rally to resist Anita Bryant at Jackson Square. Leonard Matlovic comes there, Frank Kameny comes there, Bruce Bowler comes there, all the who's who of the National Gay and Lesbian Circuit come to Jackson Square. They talk about Anita Bryant. They go march down St. Anne Street to the Municipal Auditorium, determine that they're going to stop this woman's concert, or at least ruin the people who are inside, the experience for the people who are inside listening to Anita Bryant sing, ironically, ditties like Somewhere Over the Rainbow and things like that. And they arrive and they're singing, hey, hey, ho, ho, Anita Bryant's got to go. Hey, hey, guess who was there? Members of the Unitarian congregation were there. And also the planning meetings for what was then recognized as the largest gay rights protest in New Orleans history at that time had been held at the First Unitarian Church. There was a minister named Larry D. Hardison in 1977 who spoke to a gathering of about 100. And he said, quotes, homosexuals have a dream of freedom to love without being called criminals, and they dream to live without losing their jobs and membership in churches. So again, these are straight allies formulating a kind of, in solidarity, a kind of resistance to the anti-queer policies of wider America and New Orleans in the wake of the upstairs lounge tragedy, which all leads up to, in the end, 1991, where the city of the gay and lesbian constituency of New Orleans, individuals like Charlene, churches like this very church, vestiges of the HERE coalition that had resisted Anita Bryant, Stuart Butler, the upstairs lounge survivor, all coalesced together to petition the New Orleans City Council to pass an anti-discrimination ordinance protecting for sexual orientation. And they succeeded They succeeded after many failed attempts by tying, and this is the report and the ordinance that was passed in 1991, by allying with straight city councilmen such as Johnny Jackson and Lambert Boissier, and by tying the search for queer rights in New Orleans to the tragedy of 1973, the Upstairs Lounge fire. This is the dedication page of the ordinance, and it's dedicated remembering the 32 people lost in the Upstairs Lounge fire on June 24th, 1973, 604 Iberville. That is the wider scope and broad journey, I think, and 10,000-foot view of the arc of how the terrible tragedy at the Upstairs Lounge, through a persistent set of voices over time, transformed from this social shame. It was considered this source of denial, this void of silence and disremembrance, into a sort of call to arms that eventually, right, allotted very early on, even this is before federal decriminalization, rights to queer New Orleanians, such that they could live as equal citizens in and amongst everyone else. And it took not just the queer folk themselves, but it took allied congregations like this one for that wider journey to occur, and for that search for strength to manifest in the end in the acquisition of rights and protections. And that comes from looking at dark things and the willingness, I think, for the community to ask itself tough questions involving when it failed in the past, involving how it responded to anti-queer violence, and challenging itself to say, what steps can we take now to prove that we are different? What steps can we take now to prove that we are a different, that we welcome people to step out in the open in the way that they hadn't stepped out in the open before? And that we would, and eventually it led to the city of New Orleans today, which is a place of widespread, honestly, it's like a pocket of at least queer tolerance in a region, in a part of the country that isn't known for having such tolerance oftentimes. And it's this sort of wider percolation, this sort of wider sense and scope of protection came as a result of the individuals who fought so long so that the story of the Upstairs Lounge could be known, and so that we would speak the names of the victims. I think a lot about how the quest for liberation is a battle, and I think a lot about how the quest for liberation is a struggle, and how a lot of us want to avoid the struggle sometimes because the struggle is difficult. And I'm reminded whenever I'm drifting towards complacency or thinking as a cis white gay man that I can just assimilate into the middle class and not fight for my rights. I think about the future that queer youth face, and I think about the individuals who came before me, like the people who were at the Upstairs Lounge, like Charlene Snyder, like Stuart Butler, like people who had fought to acquire the rights that I now possess without even knowing me. And I think about the way the torch gets passed and how each of us have a responsibility to bear that torch in our own time. We bear it now, and eventually we bear the Upstairs Lounge patrons bore it then. People like Charlene bore it in her time, and eventually someone else will carry it forward too. But the quest for freedom and citizenship is unending, it seems like, and the struggle, although tough, is necessary, and at the same time can be joyous, as I hope you will see if any of you walk out to the French Quarter for the parade this afternoon. It's going to be joyous. So that's my spiel about the Upstairs Lounge tragedy. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for hearing about the trajectory of this event, and thank you to the First Unitarian Church for stepping forward to protect the queer community at moments when others would not. Thank you.
All right, gifts to this community of faith are gratefully received. Let us acknowledge these gifts. And you can put your offering in the plate or use text to give on your card. Gifts to this community of faith are gratefully received. Let us acknowledge these gifts by reading together the words in your order of service. This gift from the abundance of my life blesses me, our ministries, and the world. And some spirit has already done the job for us, but let us also use the words in our order of worship to celebrate the extinguishing of the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Please rise in body or spirit and join in singing our closing hymn, number 170, We Are a Gentle, Angry People. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing for our lives. We are justice-seeking people, and we are singing for our lives. We are young and old together, and we are singing for our lives. And we are singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are getting straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are getting straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
This church is a place in our hearts and a way we live our lives. Wherever and however we gather, we bring and share the spirit of love and life. Let us invite that spirit to fill us now as we enter into the larger world. Please turn and greet your neighbor.